Okay, so I just want to welcome all of you for coming. Thank you to everybody that's watching us out there. Um, you all mean so much to me, and there is an importance for why we're doing this listening session. It's about your voice. It's about sharing your voice. And a lot of times when we do panels, there's a lot of questions, but we don't necessarily hear your own personal story. And I think your personal story matters because when somebody sees you in a panel later on, they'll understand why you think how you think, why you feel how you feel. And I think there's a lot of compassion and empathy that is built off of that. So I will let Janet get started, but thank you all again. This means so much to me, and I know it'll mean so much to the students and community and everybody else that ends up watching. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Janet Flores, and Mario is our co-moderator. He's going to be doing a little peace offering.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Mario Espinosa Kulik. He, him, his pronouns. And for our offering to peace to our ancestors and our elders today, I will be facilitating that. So please mute yourselves if you're able to. And I will say a few words, but first and foremost, that we need to honor which land we're speaking from. And I'm speaking from Chumash lands here around the San Ynez Chumash tribe in Santa Maria. And if you do not know where you are speaking from, where you are right now, and behind your Zoom frame, please do the work and do the research to understand and know which lands you are speaking from so that we can honor not only our ancestors and elders of our own lineage, but those whose lands we are also occupying. For our offering of peace and respect to our ancestors and our elders, I ask that everybody think about where your role is here in our world today and how that aligns with your history and your family and your kin, whether it be by blood or by friendship or chosen family. Also to respect the legacy that our elders have left behind for folks like me and other youth that are attending our panel today, that have laid the path for us to be here. And what are we doing to honor that every day? And how are we doing that? It can't just be that you know and that you learn about where you're from, but also practice and preserve those traditions that are strong within our family and within our roots and within our people. Thank you.
Thank you all again for being here. And Mario, thank you for that lovely acknowledgement of our ancestors and reminding us that, you know, there were people here before we got here, and we need to be mindful of that. I want to thank our panelists who are from Cuesta College, Allen Hancock, and Cal Poly, as well as the San Luis Obispo Democratic Party. And I think, Mario, you're going to review some community norms.
Yes, thank you, Janet. Our community norms today is to please listen when being spoken to. For example, we're here for a listening session, so if one of our panelists is speaking, please have your microphone on mute so that everyone can hear what they're saying. Listen respectfully without interrupting each other. As well, when you are not speaking, listen actively and with an ear to understand each other's views. We may not know exactly where everybody is aligned ideologically or politically. So do not assume everybody else is going to agree with you. And also don't just think about what you're going to say while someone is talking. Think about how what they had said is either similar or relevant to your own narrative. And finally, commit to learning, not debating. We want this to be a constructive session where we are able to express freely our narratives, our realities, our perspectives of our lives here in San Luis Obispo and surrounding areas. So please listen with an open ear and an open heart. And if you have a question at any time or need something, please raise your hand or send me a private chat.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to have give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. We're asking them to state their names, their preferred pronouns, major and school attending, or if they've graduated, to tell us from where they've graduated from. If you're a community member, please state your name and your preferred pronouns and your organization. So let's start with Anthony. Introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anthony Gutierrez. I'm the faculty coordinator of Student Life and Leadership at Cuesta College. Pronouns are he, him, his. I graduated from Azusa Pacific University with a bachelor's degree, Michigan State University with a master's, and UC Santa Barbara with my doctorate degree.
Awesome.
Thank you.
How about Adrian? You want to introduce yourself, Adrian?
Hey everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Adrian Garcia Specht. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a lifelong resident of Grover Beach, Arroyo Grande area. I currently work at Cal Poly as a financial aid counselor. In addition to that, I'm on the steering committee of the Central Coast Coalition for Undocumented Student Success. And my educational background is I went to Syracuse University in New York. In addition, I'm the daughter of Jose and Lucia Garcia, who I owe a lot to, and I just wanted to acknowledge them in this space.
Awesome. How about Jesus?
I'm Jesus Sendejas. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My pronouns are he, him, él, ello, and I go to Cuesta College, but I'm also dually enrolled in De Anza College up in Cupertino, and I'm a human development and social justice major here at Cuesta College. I'm also an advocate for ethnic studies and bilingual education here in San Luis Obispo County. And I'm also a part of Mecha de Cuesta, we're a Mexican American student club.
Thank you. Lupita, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, my name is Lupita Rios. I'm currently a political science major at Allen Hancock College, and I serve on the student body government as the Vice President of External Affairs. I'm also part of the Cultural and Creative Arts Center of the Santa Maria Valley, Corazon del Pueblo, and I serve on the board of directors of that. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers, or they, them, theirs. And I'm also part of the Gender and Sexualities Acceptance Club at Hancock.
Thank you. How about Sarah?
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Sparks. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm currently attending Boston College to get my graduate degree in higher ed and student affairs, but I previously graduated from Cal Poly with a double major in comparative ethnic studies and agricultural business. I'm also currently the president of the Cal Poly Black Alumni Chapter.
Thank you, Sarah. How about Alicia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Paniagua. My preferred pronouns are she, hers, and hers. I am a first-generation college graduate, and I also earned my Bachelor of Arts in Spanish from Azusa Pacific University, as well as my master's in secondary education from Loyola Marymount University. I am currently the coordinator for the continuing education program at Cuesta, as well as a part-time faculty for the non-credit adult basic education program. The president of the Latina Leadership Network chapter for faculty, staff, and administrators, and the Mecha co-advisor, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Elias.
Hi, y'all. Elias. I use he, him, she, her pronouns, and I am a student at UC Santa Cruz where I study critical race feminism. And I'm also an organizer with the Santa Maria Youth Abolitionists, and part of the campaign to free Mumia Abu Jamal, and trying to think of what else I'm a part of, but I think that's about it for right now.
Thank you. That's quite a bit. How about Janet?
Hi everyone, my name is Janet Rios. I am a bilingual academic success coach at Cuesta College. My pronouns are she, her, hers, or ella. I am a part of, excuse me, I just realized I didn't change my name. I am a part of the Latina Leadership Network as Vice President. I am also a steering committee member of the Central Coast Coalition for Undocumented Student Success. I reside from Santa Maria and proud native, born and raised. What else? Yes, so I just, try and show up for my community wherever I can. So thank you for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you for being here. Gabriel. Is Gabriel here?
Sorry. So hi everyone. Gabriel Cuarenta Gallegos. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a math instructor at Cuesta College. I'm also the academic senate representative for the math division at the college. Let's see. I got my master's degree in mathematics from Sac State, bachelor's in mathematics from CSU Stanislaus, master's in secondary education from University of Phoenix, and I threw in a credential in there too.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Siboney, was she able to get here?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Siboney Guardado, and my pronouns are she, hers, ella. I am an administrator at Cuesta College. I'm the associate director to Student Success Centers, and my degrees are in sociology and math from Cal Poly, and I have a master's from Cal Lutheran University.
Awesome. Our last person is Rita. Did Rita make it yet?
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, I'm from Peru. I moved to SLO County in 2012. I'm an immigration, women's rights, and climate advocate with different groups in SLO County. I am the new chair of the SLO County Democratic Party. My pronouns are her, she, hers, and ella.
All right, thank you. So we've reached the part of the program where the panelists will share their written statement and have opportunity to share some life experience thoughts on their mental health, political climates, and living or having lived on the Central Coast. And maybe what are the challenges that you see living in this area? You're Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and then what can the community around you do to create a more equitable and welcoming place? So if you could address some of those topics. And we'll start with our first panelist, which is Anthony.
Okay, thank you. When I heard I was the first one, I said, oh no, it's the first one. I'd rather be in the middle so I can hear other people's perspectives too. It's always tough going first. A little bit more about myself. I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley in the city of Azusa. That's one of the main reasons I went to Azusa Pacific, is because it was close to home and it was, driving and walking distance from my house. So after that, I decided to go to Michigan State because I wanted to actually leave California. I wanted to experience a different part of the country to see what else was out there besides the small town that I grew up in. So I wanted to make sure I had an opportunity to go. So, and that was due to a mentorship. I had a mentor when I was an undergraduate that really helped me and helped mold who I am today. And so I want to give thanks to Henry G in terms of that. So he really helped me achieve a lot of the success that I have today. So after leaving Michigan, I moved to San Jose State and was there for a few years and lived in the Bay Area for quite a few years, probably 10 years. And then decided that it was time for a move, and somehow ended up on the, hearing myself twice, sorry. And then ended up moving to San Luis Obispo. But prior to that, just to give a little bit of background, my wife and I, we had a 1-year-old daughter at the time, and we did our pros and cons list. If anyone's ever done that, before you move, you decide what you're gonna do, what are the pros and cons, and on the top of the con list was diversity for us, and the lack of having connections to family in the area. But on the flip side of that, we saw an opportunity in terms of both being people of color, moving to the Central Coast, knowing that if we didn't, who would? And so that's kind of the mindset of how I decided to move and brought my family along to that. My wife now works at Cal Poly as well. So that was a really tough decision to make. I remember one of the first instances of being in SLO. I'd never visited SLO, maybe drove by once in all of my time of living in California. And so walked into Woodstock's Pizza with my wife and daughter in a stroller, and felt like the music stopped, everyone stared, and I think we were probably the only people of color in the entire building, or at least it felt like that. And so I remember having that experience and thinking, if I feel like that as a professional, working at a college university, how do our students feel, or how do the students I'm going to work with feel in that type of environment? So really coming from that framework and trying to figure that out for my own, because I came from an area that was very diverse, had a lot of social and cultural connections in the Bay Area as well as the LA area. In terms of mental health, so I'm going to kind of, and I only have a few minutes, so in terms of mental health, I stay really connected to close friends. Everyone says, oh, you live in the happiest place. Not really. Yeah, there's, coming from the Bay Area to SLO, yeah, traffic is great. I don't have any traffic, but the trade-offs are immense. And so knowing that when I have conversations with my friends in terms of that, and really having that understanding of what it means to live in an area where you can feel isolated, you can feel like your voice isn't heard. And I felt like that as a professional on campus in the community, and knowing that it's really challenging at times, but then having connections with other people on campus is enormous. And so making sure that I keep those connections, not only on campus, but off campus. I am careful of what I say off campus as well, knowing that, there's not very many people at Cuesta that may look like me in terms of faculty, administration. I've been confused for other people on campus. When you think about, administration there's not very many other men of color there. So when you're called a different name, you're like, no, that's actually someone else. That's not me. And these are people that I've worked with for years. And so, and I can tell they're like in shock. And then I have to remind them, no, that's someone else. And you should know better than that, actually. So wrote down a few more thoughts. I think that's about it for now. I was trying to keep a timer and write down my own thoughts, but that gives you just a little glimpse, and I'm open to other questions. Also, shout out to Jesus for being on the panel. I work with Jesus as I'm also the advisor to student government. So I have the opportunity and honor of working with Jesus in his role this year. And that's just one more reason of I do what I do to help students like Jesus be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for sharing your narrative with us. I remember when I was actually a student at Cuesta College, you were also there and an inspiration for folks that wanted to go into leadership. And so I just want to also honor you in this space as being not only a panelist, but also a mentor to other folks on our campus at Cuesta College. In regards to some of the topics that you mentioned, like mental health, I did want to share a resource that I came across on Instagram called Latinx Therapy. I'll type it into the chat, but it's been a really interesting page to follow. They offer free resources and free methods to sort of deal with culturally relevant things. The other day I saw something about like how to deal with like when your mom doesn't understand X and X kind of thing, and it was just like, yeah, that's so relevant. Sometimes I don't feel understood when I talk about my mental health, and they understand that it's a generational sort of gap where mental health is not sort of is not translate efficiently to other people. So my mom, I have to tell her other kind of things like, oh, me duele el pecho cuando pienso de eso, or instead of telling her that like, well, my brain hurts, because like, well, my brain hurts every day. But yeah, so I just wanted to mention that for everybody. And Janet, can you please introduce the next person?
Adrian's the next person. Will you go on, Adrian?
Hi, thank you, Janet and Mario and Anthony so far for sharing. Thanks. Oh wait, let me start my timer because I was like I'm a rule follower. some of the time. That's my story anyway. And so, like I said in my intro, I grew up around here. I grew up in Grover Beach. I went to what was formerly North Oceano Elementary School until they gentrified the name to Fairgrove. I went to Arroyo Grande High School, and then I went away to college for a little bit in a place where there weren't a lot of Mexican Americans. So that was a big change for me. One of the stories I like to tell, or one of the stories I reflect upon in my adulthood, is the fact that in elementary school in 3rd grade, I was born in the United States. I spoke English. I read in English. I spoke Spanish with my parents, but I had 2 older sisters, so we were fluent in English by the time I was in 3rd grade. I was placed in an ESL class rather mysteriously in 3rd grade. It was for a couple weeks I was learning in Spanish, right, doing my homework in Spanish, not really thinking about, well, this is kind of weird. I had one of my best friends in the class, so we were cool with it. I didn't really take note at the time about how all of us were Latino, and all of us had been in the school system for a few years and we're fluent. And till my mom was like, "Why is your homework all in Spanish?" Like, what? She doesn't really know too much about it, but she knows my homework shouldn't be all in Spanish. And so we kind of figured out that I got placed into this classroom, and some phone calls were made by my older sisters to call the school and be like, she doesn't need to be there, and switched me over to the quote unquote regular English class, 3rd grade class, which was really interesting. And so that's something I just reflect on in terms of like something that happened to me and I didn't really think about being too weird, but then I'm like, well, hold on, who was making decisions? Who was assessing people, and what were their assessments for this? Because they got that one wrong. And in terms of making decisions locally, I think I've been thinking a lot recently about the way the Central Coast, in my experience, is actually pretty segregated. We live in segregated towns. We live as Latinos too, we have a sort of marginalized presence on the Central Coast. And I'm thinking in terms specifically in terms of civic life and public life, and the ways in which, you know, Spanish as one of the potential languages, not even to mention our indigenous languages that the population speaks, but how Spanish isn't prevalent in our official documentations or in our community downtown spaces or whatever it might be, as much as it should be. And I think about who's making decisions at a local level, our board of supervisors, our school board, our city councils, like who is making decisions for our people. And especially during COVID times, I was thinking about how a board of supervisors and a public health officials made decisions about reopening to make sure that our tourist-based economy essentially kept going on the Central Coast. But who, on the backs of who is that decision made on, right? So my mom is a housekeeper at a local hotel, and this was a very close and personal decision in my life in terms of the risk she was taking. Whose voices were at the table when those kinds of decisions were made? And you know, Latinos in San Luis Obispo County only make up 22% of the population, but we're 46% of the positive COVID cases. So there's a lot of questions that I have about that in terms of who is getting their voices heard and how are these decisions being made. And none of it's accidental, right? This is a historical legacy of this area. And so when I think about what was it like to grow up on the Central Coast and what's it like to live there now, I'm thinking about that and the marginalization there. Also, not to mention, you know, Oceano's not an incorporated city. All of these are very specific things that have happened over the years that I think it's time in terms of our current political climate, when there's a little sense of urgency and a sense of openness from white people that are actually in power right now to start thinking about these questions, and for our community to sort of push back on this too, and to sort of bring this up more and do something about it, right? And then I have like one more minute on my timer. And so in terms, I just wanted to add just really quickly about mental health. So living on the Central Coast as a Latina who's very active and very involved, both in terms of higher education and helping marginalized students and trying to dismantle the barriers that are in place for college attainment, and build a system that actually works for my people. Other than that, I still have to live with the anxiety of our current political climate, of knowing that, you know, people who look like me, the Black community members, Indigenous people, BIPOC essentially, are being targeted locally, right? that's a lot to live with. And that's not even thinking about our national news. The way when we talk about immigration nationally, that's personal. Like when we see these images, they look like my uncles, right? So that's not, that hits differently as a person, as a Latina right now. And that's something I have to, you know, I go to work every day thinking about that. So yeah, mental health, it's very important. I am in therapy. And I say that openly and talk about it a lot because it took me a long time to get there and to try to work through these anxieties and stressors, and with an acknowledgement that therapy isn't necessarily built for people of color either, but it's a step, right, to start talking about that. So I appreciate Mario bringing that up. So yeah, that's what, these are my thoughts as a Central Coast Latina right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne, for your words and the just display of courage for being so real with us. When you say it's personal, damn right it's personal. Everything is at stake here, and it just feels like every day there's just one more person like me who is at risk, who has been a victim to violence of white supremacy and racism and health inequities and disparities. When you talked about 46% of San Luis Obispo Latinx people are COVID positive cases, only represent 22% of the population. That's personal. And it's also an issue that everybody, folks who are listening, should be aware of. And think about what privileges you hold that may exclude you from being part of that percentage, and what saves you from becoming just another statistic. Janet?
Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, Mario, for the summary. That's great. Jesus, one of my favorite students, you get to be next.
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, I just like to say my name, how my ama says it, and it's Jesus Sendejas. I really kind of grappled with that and what that means, growing up in a rural agricultural town, Shandon, that's in North County. Oftentimes, we think about San Luis Obispo and the wine. Well, that starts with the labor of our gente. People like my mom, people like my dad, my grandparents, and that's powerful. And I think about that, they're immigrants from Michoacan. I was born in Templeton, that's in North County, SLO. Yeah, I grew up, it's a lot to digest. So I just have to remind myself that, I'm not fighting anyone, that I'm simply sharing my experience. Because oftentimes when we share and be vulnerable, it kind of puts us in a spot. But I'm unafraid. And I think we all should be too, because those experiences excel us forward. My school, we were 80% Mexicanos, going to a school where there was majority white teachers, white administrators. We were always told to speak English. That was something that was always on. The Pledge of Allegiance, we had to always stand up. I remember once when one of my younger friends, she was recently an immigrant from Mexico. She came and we were talking, I was fluently bilingual, I come from a very Catholic background. My grandma, my mother, they gave me the Catholic doctrine that I still follow to this day. So I was very fluent, and that bothered some of the teachers that we could communicate in something that when we couldn't say, they can understand us. And I remember I was telling her and explaining something to her, and the teacher points out, "Hey, you two, what are you two saying? If you can say it in Spanish, you can come in the front room and say it in English." Oh, well, I was just helping her. I was explaining to her. I need to understand what you're saying at all times. you know, and that's really what we need to get in our head. And it really, it takes some time to digest. That's what racism looks like in this county when our tongue is denied, because what Gloria Ansaldúa said is, if you take away our tongue, you know, you're violating our freedom of expression as Americans, our God-given right. We're censored as young children. And I have to give a shout out to Carolina Gutierrez, my mentor, a fierce Chicana advocate. She would always, there was always attempts to wipe out any trace of being Mexican. You know, Juan became John, you know, names that they couldn't pronounce became, we're gonna call you Junior. You know, it became little things like that. Mary became Marie, you know, Maria became Mary. And that's real. This didn't happen in some faraway town. This just happened a 30-minute drive from San Luis Obispo, you know? And well, that was always something that happened. And she actually had to read us books in fugitivity. And we used to have to hide when we used to read our books, because the teachers, when they used to see them, they used to be, what are you doing reading this? You shouldn't be reading this. And you best believe that that book was discarded. There was in middle school, my teacher, we were slotted to read a very famous book of explaining the life of a Mexican American in East Los Angeles. And this was during the time where the Mexican American Studies program in 2011 was banned, because students were finally, you know, awoken by the poder that our stories had. I want everyone to know that I'm the president of Cuesta College. I'm the first Latino student leader since the inception of this college in the 60s. Wow. It's taken this long, you know? And that says something. But that's not how my story starts off. No, I was always labeled that problematic child that would rebel against authority, because I always knew something in me that something was wrong, because my lineage, my familia, our history in Mexico as revolutionaries, seek survival wherever you are and resist whenever possible. That was what I did. And there was always a push to send me to the Chalk Mountain. That's where, quote unquote, all the bad kids go. What? For asking, why are we doing this? Why are you talking to us like that? For questioning, because questioning in this county, no matter where, what institution, will wreak havoc upon your life. And a lot of cases that we're seeing today is just proof of that. Look no further. I also wanted to say that I was placed into special education. I was labeled behavioral conducts, all these things. I have all my paperwork. But leaving that high school, I made sure I got all of my paperwork. You know? And I remember a lot of these things, and I'm like, wow. There came a point where it came to high school, I decided I want to enroll in Cuesta College as a dual enrollment student in junior year. Cuesta College saved my life. Education saves your life. Education liberates. I had that seed planted by my parents, Hipolito, Patricia, mucho amor, give them a shout out. My grandma. I wanted to end it up saying that I want us to share our experiences and know this is a safe space. And I do this so, you know, like when I was young, the neighbors won't shoot my dog. So the neighbors won't speed their car up more when they see us walking. No, because like my dad told me, no, mijo, we're more than that. No, we are better. We are strong and we're trabajadores. And that's where I get my strength from, my family, because we are not just some people who came here a couple years back. No, my great grandfather on my paternal side was making the railways in the early 1900s in New York. My grandpa was in the fields during World War II, sending off food to our soldiers fighting fascism. When fascism is present here now, we must dismantle it. And we must liberate ourselves as raza. And that starts with educating ourselves with our own stories. We need Chicano studies now. We need faculty that look like us. And we need respect. We are not going to be silenced anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Sarah, you're next. Do you want to take off from where Jesus left off?
Wow, thank you for sharing such powerful words. It's really great to be able to hear and experience. I know we're all just kind of meeting and getting to know each other's stories, so thank you for that. In terms of my own story, so I identify as Afro-Chicana. My dad is Black and my mom is Mexican. And so I was born and raised in San Luis Obispo. So I spent, 23 years in SLO. And to be honest, I internalized a lot of oppression. I internalized a lot of racism. Growing up, I definitely had a lot of moments where I didn't want to connect to my Mexican side. And there was a lot of pain around that. I felt as though I had to perform in all of my classes. Speaking up was not a thing. I knew very much I needed to practice self-control. I needed to act a certain way, talk a certain way. It was very clear. And I knew that going into high school, when I would be in my AP classes, I remember my dad would always tell me, like, you're the only one. You need to be mindful of how you act in this space. You need to think about how others perceive you. And it was a lot. It was a lot of pressure. And it was a lot to think about all the time. Just like, okay, am I sitting right? Am I talking okay? Am I doing the things? Am I performing every day? And it actually wasn't until I got to Cal Poly that I started taking ethnic studies. And Dr. Jose Navarro is a great professor. I took a Chicano studies class. And that was the first time where I felt healing, where I felt as though I could learn about my culture, I could love it, I could critique it, I could learn and do so much with it. I started getting the words I needed and the language, and I started for the first time to feel empowered. Eventually, I was able to get a double major, adding that ethnic studies, and it truly provided so much healing. It made me really critically think about the world. It made me question and critique. And just now, actually, my grads program, I'm starting to speak up. I call out white supremacy. I say things how they are. I never did before. I never felt like I had that voice, but I'm recognizing, especially thinking about Black lives, like, it needs to be said. I don't have an option. As I watch my friends they're getting charged right now for protesting, as I see the pain of my family and my friends, and there's so much, I think, to unpack. I remember also, like, just growing up in SLO, I worked as a cook for a while, and the things that people felt entitled to say, they would call me dumb. They would speak to me like I didn't understand. I remember one time I made the comment that I was getting a degree, and the answer was, really? Like, are you really truly getting that? And even thinking about my time at Cal Poly, like, the ethnic studies department kept me, and the Black Student Union, that kept me together. But in other spaces, one of my majors was in ag, and my counselor told me, you're not gonna graduate on time. You're not gonna make it out of here. I'd go ask for support, and the answer was always no, or some excuse. So I really had to rely on my network of people of color, there were so many great Black women that really supported me and fought for me, and stood beside me. But if it wasn't for that, it's hard being a first gen college student at Cal Poly, predominantly white space, definitely comes with its challenges. So I think there's so much to say, but it's really just thinking like SLO is so so racist. And I think as a child, like I didn't know how to stand up or speak out. I didn't know how to name it. I didn't understand what things could be said. And now as I go back into that community and I think about it, I really do try and call things out for what they are. I don't want other students growing up in San Luis Obispo to have the same experiences I did, to have that fear, to feel like, no, I can't dream, I can't believe, I can't create and have joy and experience all the great things that make us beautiful. I know the other day I was talking to some colleagues and they're like, oh, we just need to help these students survive the institution. They just need to survive. And I was like, no, we're worthy of so much more. We're worthy of thriving and of experiencing joy. And so I guess the biggest thing that I would say is just for people who are entering SLO, as people of color, like find a network in a community. It's small, but it is there. There are pockets of joy within the community. I know, like I said, the ethnic studies department was a big one for me, the Black Student Union and other communities. But it's necessary because people deserve to thrive. At the end of the day, we have the right to joy. Joy is our resistance. And so I definitely just encourage others who follow after to continue to pursue that and fight for it because, like I said, worthy of so, so much more.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your narrative. I love that tone of joy is our resilience, definitely. I mean, and just seeing, I just saw a video on Twitter of how voters dancing in line was making so many people angry. And I'm just like, keep on showing up, keep on dancing, keep on spreading that joy. Janet?
Alicia, will you go next?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Janet, so much. And so it's funny as I'm listening to everybody else, I'm just nodding in the back. You know, if I could snap, I would snap, but I'm nodding because I agree with everything that is being said, right? Sarah, as you're sharing your story, I'm like, yes, girl, yes. Like I remember, you know, some of those days for me. And I grew up in the Central Coast as well. Here in Santa Maria. I'm a daughter of migrant farm workers. And so something that I have to say is that growing up, I couldn't really understand, you know, or conceptualize or just even put into name the experiences that I was facing or that I was living, right? And so it wasn't until I left for college, right? And I stayed in LA for 10 years, you know, going to school, working, and I came back and I'm living here and I'm like, oh my goodness, microaggression. Oh my goodness, discrimination. Oh my goodness, this is imposter syndrome that I'm facing, you know? And so all of this after coming back, you know, after having the guidance from mentors, after being able to check in with my amistades, right? That I was able to put it into words and to talk about my own experience, right? And so having faced some of those things, you know, I come back and I'm like, okay, Alicia, like, what are you going to do? Right? Because often we get stuck into talking about this and we can easily, you know, just share and continue sharing the struggles. But what I love about the network or the community that I've built in SLO is that, okay, ladies, ¿qué vamos a hacer? What are we going to do? How are we going to move past this? What can we do? And oftentimes, and I've caught myself saying this, they're going to tell us no. They're going to tell us no. Like it's always the same conversation we're facing, you know, that's above your, you know, that's not something, you know, we're addressing it or whatnot. And so it's like, okay, but they're going to keep telling us no, right? But what is it that we can do? ¿Cómo nos podemos animar, right? How can we give each other that empujoncito of like, no, do not give up, keep, you know, addressing some of these issues, keep talking about these issues, you know, take action. And so for me, I've seen it all through growing up, especially in school. I grew up speaking in Spanish. I was in a privileged position where my parents work in agriculture, and they were able to send us to a private school, of course, predominantly white school. My cousins were the only other Latinos, or to be honest, Mexicanos, that were a part of that school. And so I remember being in second grade and asking my cousin, what did the instructor say? What did the teacher say? And being told, you can't speak in Spanish, And so for me, like I said, I didn't recognize what that was. And school was never easy for me. I was always one seeking tutors and mentors and guidance. And to be honest, my older sister, Mayra, was the one breaking through and guiding the pathway for my siblings, right? So that when my sisters got older and some of my younger siblings were placed in ESL classes as well, right? Or one of my younger sisters, Daisy, right, who is working with us and supporting some of the work that we're doing with LLN. I remember she told me, Ali, they don't want to put me in AP class, and she was an honors and AP student in the private institution. And when she came into public school, they were not allowing her. And so, of course, while I was working in my grad program, my mom and my sister were like, Alicia, you're the one that has to go talk to them because you're in education. So that was put on my plate. And of course, that's when I was like, okay, this is happening. This is really happening. Like, I thought it's something that you just hear, but no, it's happening to my sisters. It's happening in my family. I know it's happening to other folks, right? And we have to take action. We have to not keep quiet. Like Jesus said, we have to speak our minds and not take no for an answer, right? I'm happy to say, and I'm super excited to say, my sister's now going to school at an Ivy school, and she's pursuing her master's. But imagine if we would have told that counselor, I guess if we wouldn't have said anything, where would she have been, right? So for me, that piece of taking action has been huge. And also finding that sense of community. And I know I keep saying community, but community is huge. I remember coming back to SLO and I was like, well, I mean, I'm from here, but I haven't lived here for 10 years. All my friends are not here. I need to find my community. And it took me a while. And I'm happy to say that there was a lot of, mujeres at Cuesta that took me in under their wing, Janet, Estela, Dee, Glenda. I know that these are all mujeres that I can reach out to, and they're there to mentor, to guide me. Right. And so I'm very thankful that I was able to find that. And I encourage everyone else, please seek out that community. At Cuesta, we have our different clubs, and those clubs are there for you because we want to create a safe space for you where you could, take action, right? And talk and share those experiences so that you don't feel alone, especially if you're not from the SLO area. And if you are from the SLO area, then those organizations or these clubs can help you, put a voice to some of the concerns that you're having and addressing, and being engaged, at your institution. And so, some of the stereotypes also having faced, when we recognize that our community is extremely diverse, right? Our Latinx community, it's not only diverse linguistically, but also ethnically and culturally, and embracing all of our differences. That makes us beautiful as a gente, as a raza. That makes us who we are, our unique selves. And so knowing that, it just learning how to embrace. I have to be honest, for me growing up, sometimes I was like, oh my goodness, well, that's the Mexican side of me. And I'm like, I know, put the music down, or I know this or that. And no, embrace it. If that's who you are, take it on. And nowadays I say I love banda, and I embrace who I am as an individual, right? You embrace it and you take it on and you enjoy it, because you have to. Imagine if we're just living in all the negativity, or we take in all the discrimination, or we have to try to move past it and use it and embrace it within us, to start taking action. Something that's really dear to my heart is, this whole aspect of mental health. And so I know that there has been so many issues that I faced, and like I keep saying, having that community has been so important in how I've been able to grow, not only at school as an educator, but also at home. There's so much stigma associated with mental health and seeking help. But there's so much that you can get in learning from people and having that support. And it often takes vulnerability, right? And also accepting and being gentle with yourself. you know, and talking it over with family and friends. I'm going to be very honest with you all right now. I've reached out to Janet, and there have been points where I've just broken down, and I'm like, Janet, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to approach this. And Janet has, you know, come over to my house and has done sessions. And so for me, that has been huge, right? Because we don't talk about that, you know. In the Latino community, you say you need to go to therapy. Ay, pues es que no estoy loco. And it's not about going crazy. It's about your well-being. We take it all in, especially our mujeres, right? We tend to take it all in for our entire family, but what does that mean for us? And something that I've learned from this is self-care. And it's not being selfish, right? And you need to be able to take care of yourself in order to take care of others and support others. And so I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but I think that is key, right? Having that community, that support group that you can check in, reach out. And I know that there are so many resources, and in a lot of the events that we've been having for Hispanic Heritage Month, we share resources, and it's important, right? To seek out the help and to ask for support, to ask for the resources, because there's so much out there right now. And so what advice could I give to anyone that's living in the SLO area or residing in this area? Honestly, finding that sense of community. And for me, it has been refreshing and healing. Honestly, it has been healing, where I have a space where I can start conversations, whether it's with students, and I've had those deep and hard conversations with students, with coworkers, right? And growing from each other's lived experiences. Finding that comunidad has been what has kept me sane, honestly, and seeking those spaces, right, on campus through the student clubs, or with other network of friends. It can be nerve-wracking, but for myself, I could say that I don't know where I would be without my gente, without my comunidad. That takes the time really to listen and to help and support. So that would be my advice. Find that community. And if you need to connect with a particular group on campus, I'm happy to share my email in the chat so that we can connect you, because honestly, that has been my saving grace while being in the area.
Thanks, Alicia, for sharing your narrative with us. Very informative, and just like, can I just say, you are brilliant, and a leader. And so, like, I just want to honor that. And I wanted to say, you know, we're here all together, 33 of us participants, and I wanted to open up the chat for people to share any resources on mental health that you might know about. I have a link that I'm sharing for Transitions Mental Health Association. They're really good in linking people to resources in the community. The mental health has been a theme that has come up various times by our panelists, and so it is very important to our community, our gente. Janet?
Hi, I made a mistake and I skipped Lupita. I'm sorry, Lupita. So I would like for you to go next.
It's okay. Hi everyone. So I just want to reintroduce myself. Let's see, 603. So I'm a Hancock student, right? And it's my third year at Hancock. So I talked to Christina a little bit about this panel, and she just said to, like, you know, give you all kind of like an idea of who I am. And it's been really great to listen to everybody, because it just gives each other like a perspective of who we are as people. And so it's really beautiful so far to hear some of your stories, because a lot of people said so many things that resonated with me. Like what Jesus said about like our names was really powerful, because for me, like, you know, being in elementary and stuff, I was always like, it was always difficult for people to kind of like say my name and stuff. Or I just remember, like, if we got like a certificate for, I don't know, for getting a new reading level, the principal would say my name, Guadalupe Rios Leon, and I just like remember, it's just like grabado in my mind, like it's kind of like recorded in my head, just like that pronunciation of like all these like my white principal, or you know, my white teachers, like kind of like making little like rhyming songs out of my name, like rhyming Lupita with like a bunch of other words, and just like my name, my identity being something that people can easily feel like they can like toss around was something that I grew up dealing with. Also just not identifying myself with my original name was really hard too, pushing that part away from me, and having such a special name like Guadalupe, which is like the patron saint of Mexico. And so being proud of that too is something that I've had to learn to do. But yeah, as a resident of the Central Coast, you know, my earliest memories of San Luis Obispo are very few, just because even though I live in Santa Maria, I'm born and raised here, we never really went, you know, to Pismo Beach often. We never really saw the beach, like, you know, unless it was like maybe like 2-3 times a year, which is really crazy, you know, because we live on the Central Coast and we deserve, you know, to be part of the beauty that's here. But my earliest memories of San Luis Obispo, the city, was I think I was like 11 or 10 or something. And I had like this purple digital camera that I would take everywhere with me. I would even take it to school and I would take pictures like during recess of like the grass, like the shadows of like me and my friends at peace signs. And I took it to San Luis Obispo one time, you know, but I don't know what happened. I got upset over something, and I think I was just walking with my family, and in the background I see these like they looked really tall to me. They looked super old at the time, but it was just probably because I was a kid. Now that I think about it, they were probably just college students at Cal Poly. They looked like frat guys or something. And I just remember them seeing my family walking, you know, we were walking to the Apple store or something. And I just hear like the words like fucking beaners. Like, sorry for my language, but that's the first thing I hear. And it's like forever ingrained in me because it's like my first memory of being in San Luis Obispo. You know, and so growing up, like, I don't know, 2012, like 2016, like these like very what do you call it? Very important years in like American history so far, like in the past couple decades, like all in like race tensions have just been rising, and I've just been learning more and more about like oppression and microaggressions and stuff. And so I always considered San Luis Obispo as a racist town because of that, just because I never really felt comfortable visiting. And it just made me so aware of not my skin color, because I'm a lighter skinned individual. I benefit from white privilege in a way that some of my peers have not, you know, how they've experienced actual like racism and colorism. But it made me so aware being in San Luis Obispo. It made me aware of the language that my family spoke, you know, not looking white, even though like I said, I benefit from being lighter. We just didn't look white, and it just made me aware of the fact that I wasn't white. When growing up in Santa Maria, 90% of schools, 90% of kids in my schools were white. I mean, Latino, but my teachers were white. The principals, they were white. So all I saw was people in positions of power that were white. That was the only representation I had for knowing white people. It was people in power. And so I associated like whiteness with power, and it just made me realize that's like later on in interactions, whether it was interacting with white people in public, I just sort of felt like I kind of became passive, or like, I don't know how to explain it, but because I associated with all these like things, and I knew that, and I had seen like racism in other places. I feel like I'm rambling, but it was just crazy because the difference between Santa Maria and San Luis Obispo was just like wild. It was just like Santa Maria was just completely, you know, Latinx, and San Luis Obispo was completely white, yet we were only like 30 minutes away from each other, and it was just completely segregated. And so as a resident of the Central Coast, that's what I see. I wish I could talk a little bit more about who I am and like mental health and ways that I, you know, find resilience and like survival. But yeah, thank you, Catherine. It is my lived experience. So, and Santa Maria's city leadership is still overwhelmingly white. It is. I wish that, you know, we could change a lot of things, but it's hard when the people in power have their feet on the ground and they're not moving in, because when you're, you know, when you have that privilege, you feel entitled to holding on to it and letting it go. Letting go of that power to them is losing something. And yeah, making it about race, yeah, making it about us versus them, because there's such an imbalance of power and inequity that we see in Santa Maria. There are people living in country homes they make like hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, and there's people living in multiple families living in rooms together, making it's just the small proportion in comparison. So it's like Santa Maria is just one example of a lot of inequity, but then you look at the next door, San Luis Obispo, it's even crazier, because a lot of business owners, a lot of teachers, a lot of people in power, they have investments in Santa Maria as well. It's this whole thing with agriculture. I'm not gonna get into it. I wish that I could talk more about who I am to let you guys know. Just the things that that I've been through as somebody on the Central Coast, first generation. But I'm really lucky, because I grew up with people that didn't make it. They didn't make it through. Like Ivan Nunez, like I grew up with him. If you guys know who he is, me and him had the same friends growing up. So if you know a little bit about him, then it's just one example of kids that I grew up with that I just remember. And sadly, we have had a lot of losses in our community. That it just goes to show that that we deserve more opportunities and we deserve equality. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lupita. And let me just say, it is an honor to serve with you on the board. You are a powerful leader and just an inspiration. I agree a lot with what everybody is saying. If it is even a little bit racist, it's racist. Just flat, it's racist. Doesn't matter what scale of the spectrum of racist it is, it's racist. So I love that you called that out.
Okay, the next person is Elias. Elias, help me pronounce your name correctly.
Yeah, no worries. It's Elias.
Elias, thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm sorry, I didn't prepare anything. So this is gonna be freestyle off of what I've heard from folks and where my politics diverges. So one thing that I do want to acknowledge is something that my professor Gina Dent told me on the very first day that I met her. She said, I said, "Oh, hi, my name is Elias. How do you say that?" And I told her, "Oh, well, you could say it Elias or Elias or Elias." I get kind of tired of correcting people, as other folks have brought up. And one thing that she told me was, "You have very little control in your life. Take control of your name." And so that's something that I would have to say, one of the most important lessons that I've learned from some amazing professors at UC Santa Cruz. And I want to say that my experience in the academy was a very special one, learning from people like Gina, like Nick Mitchell, like Angela Davis. So just to name a few, like some really prominent folks. But I think I'm not so much interested in my own narrative. I think I can plot some points where they've been important to my development in my own politics. But I think I'm interested in the narrative that my position takes place in, right? So I am a first generation Latino student. And I'm a third generation in this country, right? So I have citizenship, right? And so when I think about my position as a mestizo in this community, I also have to be aware of the ways in which I celebrate myself, right? Because if we're up on this stage, and I'm gonna be real, I offered my spot to some other friends who are indigenous, and they preferred not to be on stage, whether for anxiety, disability reasons, whatever the case may be. But the point is, I think that my position is one of mourning, right? My grandfather is indigenous, but does not carry on any of those legacies with him, right? So my position is not to celebrate my own mestizaje, mestizaje, but rather to do the work to build power with our indigenous and with our Black communities, right? So part of that work for me is really pushing towards leftist politics, building power towards decolonial politics. And I don't mean decolonize the academy, because the academy is something that needs to go, right? So for me, I think this looks like recounting the stories that do matter. And one of the stories that really matters for me is when I worked with young people at Taylor Elementary School. One of the students, because of his disability, was acting out. And so as an abolitionist, I like to highlight the carceral logics that we are playing in every single day in our own communities. And so acting out of the boundaries of normality, right? And so this student was doing that. And I just remember every single day, this kid would act out. See, even myself, I have to catch myself, right? But for lack of a better term, the student was acting out, and because he was frustrated because he didn't get the work. So what would they do? They would isolate him, which is exactly what the prison does. Isolate him in the principal's office. And the next day he would come back and he would still be frustrated because he didn't learn anything. So it would be more isolation. So I think these are the stories that really need to be highlighted. And another thing that really needs to be highlighted and deconstructed is the celebration of Mexicanness. Like, my family is from Mexico, right? My grandfather is from Michoacan. My grandmother is from Zacatecas, right? But I think what's important to remember is that that land has not always been Mexico, right? And that the land was primarily taken care of by indigenous folks, and that we need to be inviting right, our comrades from Central America, right, from El Salvador, from Nicaragua, from Panama, right? These are the stories that often get left out when we are telling the Latinx narrative. And I think these are the stories that need to come in to the lenses that we're analyzing. Because if not, there's a whole lot of stories that are left out, right? And we get an incomplete picture. And so I think for me, the story that needs to be told is one of decolonizing our own identities and what it means to be mestizo. Because for me, it's one of, like I said earlier, it's one of mourning, and it's one of celebrating my comrades around me. So that's a little bit about me and my politic. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Elias, for sharing with us your politics and a little bit about carceral logics and normativity. Definitely want to work towards decolonizing these constructs that prevent folks from expressing themselves and even punish folks for expressing themselves, for even being frustrated. Janet?
The next person we want to hear from is Janet.
Okay, hi everyone. I didn't really prepare anything either. I think thank you for having me once more. I'm gonna speak from the heart. Again, like I said, born and raised in Santa Maria, daughter, first generation daughter of immigrants, also recognizing, the power, the privilege that I now hold, being able to just be here with you all today, having access to, the folks who planned this is a privilege. So thank you, Christina, thank Mario, Janet for doing this today. And being really honest, I think sharing my story was really hard for me to come in today, just because I thought, well, there are other stories, that should be highlighted, acknowledging what is happening with our our Black community and acknowledging what's happening with our LGBTQ community, our Indigenous communities in the area, just across, there's so much going on, has been going on, and even now people don't see it, but it's been people are starting to see it or kind of want to see it with the pandemic at hand. And so I think it's been interesting following everything and also trying to process how I experience the world. I mean, living in Santa Maria, predominantly, Latinx community, mainly, around me, it was mainly, Mexican friends. But what did that experience look like? And I used to be really ashamed of my culture, honestly. I used to put the music up, just even in the car when we drove up to Robert Bruce Elementary School. I would be like, put the window up, please. I don't want to listen to this. But then I joined a leadership organization. And I think even though for me, it was still a little bit more on the, like I'm the most oppressed or I'm the one going through this, like joining Future Leaders of America really helped me embrace my culture. Huge shout out to one of my biggest mentors, Patricia Solorio. With that organization, I really started to embrace who I was, my identity. And I think that's where I first learned about what college was, what does it mean to speak up for others, underserved communities. And like I said, I felt like I was living in this bubble, being in Santa Maria. And then I'm gonna skip all the way to grad school. I had a whole other reality. I think growing up, I'm a reference academia, what equity, inequity, racism, microaggressions are, but you don't have the terms for them. Those words, they're academic, they're buzzwords often. These are people's narratives, people's stories. And for me in grad school, I mean, I had never been around so many white people. My Black friends, my Asian friends, we were all just kind of like, how do we use our voices in these spaces? Maybe not for ourselves, but for people that are experiencing the oppression more than me. And I remember being in the classroom and it was hard because you're one of the few people of color, but you're like, okay. And I'm a white Latina. So in that space, it's like, I have privilege. And so for me, it was really about, how do I speak up for myself and also recognize that I'm not the one having almost like the worst experience, I guess you could say. But it was really hard because I had to find my voice. It was almost like a balance that I had to find, like a balance with how do I advocate for myself and advocate for others. And so I really had to sit with that. I had to sit with that for a while. And it was almost this thing of like, I have a lot of privilege and I need to use that privilege to speak up. And so when I was at KU, University of Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas, I really had to use my voice. I was very quiet. I mean, even with Future Leaders, going into grad school, it felt like a different experience altogether. And so now that I'm at Cuesta, I try and use my voice where I can, when I can. And just in, my sister's an inspiration too. She's constantly always speaking up. My parents, oftentimes it's trying to fight norms. I tell my parents I don't want to have kids. I could see myself single for a while, getting my PhD one day, often deconstructing what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to operate in non-traditional roles, gender roles, wanting to pursue a PhD before I consider marriage. And so that's been very interesting for me navigating, talking about anti-Blackness in my family, or even just acknowledging that within our own identities of being Mexican, there is racism, colorism, and our families being like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Like I have friends that are of this ethnicity or of this community within our community too. And so it's just been interesting finding a balance between acknowledging that our community has a lot of work to do. And how do we talk about that without ignoring the challenges that our own community goes through? Like, how do we do both? And I think that is a big question that I really ask myself through this work. And it's just been interesting. It's been an interesting experience, being back in Santa Maria after 7 years. What does community look like for me? I seeked out a therapist in January. I was like, I'm I'm straight out of grad school. I haven't been home for 7 years. My friends are at a different place than me, emotionally. Some are getting married, some have relationships, some are still finishing their bachelor's. Me recognizing that I had the privilege to leave home, get a bachelor's, go get a master's, like in the way society expects me to, in that order. But then coming back, being a professional. And so it's just been interesting navigating, trying to really talk about my feelings and what does my role look like now that I can, use my voice? And how do I learn to use it effectively to help others? Yeah.
Thank you, Lupita. Thanks for sharing your narrative with us. Definitely, wow. First gen, we are all first gen, I believe. Everybody who has identified as first gen has at least identified like how you're leading the way and how you're paving that way for others to follow. And I really admire that of all of our panelists, is your tenacity and resilience, and also just like being so like what, like chingona, like for lack of a better word. Janet?
Okay, I get to introduce Gabriel. I remember we had a mecha booth and Gabriel walked up to buy some tamales or something, and I thought he was a student. I'm trying to recruit him to join mecha, and he goes, "I teach here." I'm like, "Oh, thank you, great, that's awesome." So I'm anxious to hear your story.
All right, thank you, Christina and Mario and Janet for putting this on. And yeah, it's been quite a trip moving from the Central Valley. I actually moved here just about 2.5 years ago. And yeah, it's just, I mean, I've heard, the story of San Maria being so different, and it's only 30 minutes. And now the Central Valley seems like a universe away from here. I moved here because my daughter a couple of years ago got diagnosed with a lung and liver disease, lung and liver disease. And the Central Valley is not the best place for her condition, because it's highly polluted. And so we made the choice to move away from the valley, mainly because of that. And where we were going to go, we're going to, we try to look at the West Coast. And so I applied at several community college along the West Coast. And then just the interview experience in the West Coast, it was, that in itself was eye-opening. I was in every single space, I was the only person of color that was in the room, and including Cuesta. And just like Anthony was saying before too, we went through pros and cons of where to go, because I had many offers along the coast. And one of the things I did like, the interview committee here, but one of the things we saw when we looked at diversity was, it looks like there's a huge space out there. There's a lot of diversity, because we looked at a dot plot, right? And of course we saw Santa Maria, but we wanted to be closer to the coast. And it looked like, well, look, there's this place called like Los Osos or something. And then between Los Osos and San Luis Obispo, there's like this huge place with like all kinds of diversity, like all kinds of, there's like, the different key colors on the dot plot. It's for like it's a single person, and it's the race of the person. And so it'll be like brown for Hispanic, and black for African American, and then blue for like white.
All right. While we wait for Gabriel, just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight from what has been said in from thus far. It's a different place here, and it's really important to figure out like where you want to live, especially in San Luis Obispo. Like I work there, I work in San Luis Obispo, but I live in Santa Maria. And it's like for my mental health, like really, really good to live here, and not be reminded of like how not white I am when I go to SLO. And I also wanted to honor a couple of other words that were said that I see in the chat, especially around acknowledging those places of privileges in our own identities, and also how that can be harmful for others. And I respect all of our panelists for not only identifying that, but highlighting ways that you practice that as well.
So let's move on to Siboney.
Hi, everyone. Well, I just have to say, everything sounds so familiar. I feel like there were so many steps that have gone through already that a lot of you have already mentioned. But my story started in San Luis Obispo in 1994. I am a first generation Latina who grew up in San Diego. And I grew up in an area where predominantly everybody spoke Spanish or Laos. And as I was growing up, the things that you would see is mainly gangs, poverty, trafficking, and that was the norm. So for me, college was my ticket out. In school, even though I was born in San Diego, as most, I don't know if all of you know where that is, but it's really close to the border, to Tijuana. So my primary language is Spanish, and I didn't learn English until I was in the 6th grade. I am born in San Diego, but for one reason or another, English wasn't needed. And I grew up just speaking Spanish, and my role was to be able to help my 5 younger siblings. They're all boys. We were raised by a single mom. And so all I knew was that I had to put the example for my siblings. I didn't know how or who to follow or where to read. And so that was huge, but I spoke math. That's one of the things that I tell everyone. I didn't speak English at the time, but I spoke math. I was really good at math. And so even though I learned my English in 6th grade, I was already in calculus. By the time I was in middle school, they had to bump me down a little bit because they didn't have calculus. So it all depends where you're at too, because our high schools, at least for me, I don't think they prepared me. So knowing math, I applied to Cal Poly. I applied to a few other schools, but every time I went to those schools and visited, I had an excuse on why not to go. And once I got to my last one, which was Cal Poly, I'm like, no, I can't go visit it because otherwise I'm gonna have an excuse and not go. So I accepted. Back then you had to send a little piece of paper in the mail and that was your acceptance. And I made it there and I made it to Cal Poly. And my mom had really taught me to embrace my culture, to embrace my roots. So at a really young age, I was always dancing ballet folklorico, going to any type of history event, a la bola, in Tijuana, and so when I got to Cal Poly, that was really what I want to say saved me, because coming from a big city to a small town of San Luis Obispo, where hardly did you see anyone as you, and I'm very light-skinned, like others said, I'm privileged, and I wanted to know how to use that privilege. And so I didn't know what I didn't know. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I learned through my experience at Cal Poly that I needed to connect with people. I needed to create my own support group. And I met, a lot of great mentors at Cal Poly when I was there in school. I joined Ballet Folklorico, I joined Diversity Task Force. And it was a hard experience. I'm not gonna lie, it was a hard experience because whenever I was asked on questions, it was almost like I was representing everybody for that one question, and it didn't seem fair. you know? And so now that I am in a position of privilege, I really want to be that mentor that I didn't have. I want to help students navigate, you know, our educational system. Our parents or parents understand that there's a big divide between what they're expecting to how the American system is. So with that, I tell other students who are listening, don't give up, you know, embrace your roots, take the opportunity to mentor younger students. We don't know how to network. If you grew up in a culture where no le hables a ese señor, you know, they're older than you, what are they gonna think? You know, you're a female and, you know, don't speak up, don't do this. And I am the eldest and with 5 younger brothers, so I had to go and represent them. So I had to be, you know, the luchadora there. So it is hard. It is hard, but you have to take it little pieces at a time. And I think for me, that's my biggest goal, that I need to make things a little bit easier for those that are going to be taking my position. And right now I am an administrator at Cuesta, so I'm hoping to continue doing that.
Thank you, Siboney, for sharing your narrative with us. So powerful. In the chat, folks saying you're an amazing mentor, and I believe them, just from the short that I've heard. And I do want to recognize that, you know, being that luchadora, sometimes our family doesn't give us the choice. You know, sometimes we're pressured into that position. And me being the youngest, I was always expecting people to show up for me, but that never really happened in like the most explicit ways. Sure, there are different ways that they showed up, but not in the ways that I had like expected, being like the little one or whatever. So thank you for highlighting that. Janet?
Our next person is Rita.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much to everyone that have shared their experiences. It really means a lot to know that I've seen a lot of people nodding, and I know because a lot of our experiences are shared, and it's so good to have these many panelists sharing stories that we all can identify with. I'll tell you a little bit about me. If you don't know me, I am from Peru, like I mentioned in my intro. My parents, I'm from Lima, Peru, which Lima is the capital of Peru. My parents were born in the Andes of Peru. So I've always lived with these two cultures, even back in Peru, where my parents spoke Quechua, which is the Inca language. And they moved to Peru when they were adults and they had a family together. But I always grew up listening to a different language than mine. And it's being interesting because now that I live here in the US, I moved here to live with my husband. I also live within these two different cultures. My husband is white. He was born in the US. He's from Atascadero. And a lot of the experiences that we have and that we share gives us both of us perspectives that we wouldn't have otherwise. For example, he gets to see differences in treatment, opportunities, assumptions that people have about me and about him or about our relationship. Whenever we travel out of the country and we're coming back, or experiences when I had a Peruvian passport, would be different by Customs and Border Patrol, for example. I would get the chicken question, which I've told people about. They always ask me, what's the chicken question? And it's when Customs and Border Patrol asks you, do you have a chicken in your suitcase? And people don't realize that this is an actual question that I've received multiple times. I've also been asked if I have a pineapple in my suitcase or if I have potatoes. And these are questions that obviously he doesn't get, even though we're traveling together. And the questioning that I get usually takes about 20 minutes. Well, the questioning that he gets with an American passport, it's like 3 or 5 minutes. The questions that I received are actually now the words that I've heard from CBP. I've also heard from a friend who is from Brazil, and she was coming back to the US, and CBP asked her, what restaurant do you work for? rather than what do you do for a living. And so those assumptions are things that he wouldn't have been exposed, and it just gives me a perspective of the things that US born or white people in the US are just not aware exist, you know. But it also helps me get the perspective of non-normalized behavior that otherwise I would receive and think, oh, this is okay, this is what everyone gets, because I see the type of treatment that my husband gets, who's a male, white, US born. I always tell people that my experiences in the U.S. Since I've moved to San Luis Obispo County in 2012 from Peru are kind of separated in two parts. One of them is pre-2016 and another one is post-2016. Pre-2016, I really thought that I was living in the happiest city in the US. I was in this perfect bubble of people always being nice, saying, how are you doing? Good morning. Everyone's super happy. But starting early 2016, I started experiencing acts of racism in SLO County, downtown SLO, in Atascadero, in Paso Robles, and heard from friends that they were experiencing the same kind of things in different parts of the Central Coast. And just, I think there was a push that made people feel bold enough to say things that maybe they were thinking before and thought that are now normal to say out loud. And that's when I woke up. Luckily, I woke up and I realized that I had to take action. So since 2016, I've been an immigration, a climate and women's rights activist. In 2018, I decided to get my citizenship, and in 2019, last year, I became a citizen. I was privileged enough to have a path to citizenship, and since then, kind of one thing have led to the other. Where this April, I became the chair of the SLO County Democratic Party. I always say that I'm really proud of the party that elected a brown, young, loud sometimes woman, and I don't see that in other parties, but I'm really proud of the party that elected me, and I think it was like a huge leap of faith from their part as well, but I think it was just a show of wanting new voices, new perspectives, and I'm just really proud of our local party. I also know that by sharing my experiences with the party that I'm part of and just all the different groups that I'm part of helps bring different perspectives to their lives. Like I said, things that they wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. But I also always try to remind people that my experiences, like my experiences with CBP, crossing the border while I travel, are not is not bad compared to other realities, right? Like compared to the reality of our farm workers, of our community that has had to live through COVID, of the reality of the 545 kids that currently have no parents and that we just can't track down their parents because cruelty was the point, and because we have elected officials that are leading from a point of cruelty. And so since I became chair of the SLO County Democratic Party, I've been working hard to elect leaders and get people elected that understand our culture. And I'm really excited about the work that we're doing. We actually currently have in our endorsed candidates, we have representatives for Congress and at the federal and state level, and all three speak Spanish, which we hadn't seen before. Extremely proud of the type of representation that we're putting forward, but also recognize that whenever we try to make our endorsement or elected officials or people running for office, whenever we try to recruit, the thing that we hear the most is, I already have a target in my back. Why would I put a bigger target, you know? And we can't allow that. We can, we're doing our best from our side on our party to not put targets on people from other parties just because of who they are. We'll put targets if they're saying racist things. We for sure will put them, but not because of who they are as people and parts of them or characteristics that they have that they just didn't have a choice on. So I am working hard on getting out the vote right now. SLO County has 23,000 Latino voters. Only 27% of them have voted. We still have 16,000 votes left. So we have 16,000 people with their ballots on their countertops. I've been there, I get it. So we still have 16,000 ballots at home in SLO County that have not been turned in. In 2018, a race in South County, here in SLO County, was decided by only 56 votes, 56, and we have 16,000 votes. So if we wanted to, the Latinx community could decide the elections or local elections, city races, school boards, the state level, or state representatives or congresspersons. So if we acknowledge the power that we have, and we come together as a community and we take our ballot to a drop-off location or go to the county clerk from October 31st to November 3rd and vote in person, whichever works best for us, we can decide the future of our government for the next couple of years. The one thing that I wanted to mention too is that I completely understand that the systems that I'm now part of, for example, with the SLO County Democratic Party, which is who I'm representing today, those systems were not built thinking about us. They were not built thinking that someone was learning a second or third language, and they were not built for people that have to have 2 or 3 jobs, to have a income to be able to buy food and pay rent. They were not built for people that have to deal with institutionalized racism every day. So my job as chair is to break down the information and break down the systems in a way that can be digested and can open up participation to others that are part of our community. I am pretty much brought my chair to the table, and I made a second chair, and I'm putting it just to keep the door open. I'm just pretty much jamming the chair so more people can come in behind me. So the advice that I give to everyone that is new to the area is to make a huge effort to find what brings joy to you. A lot of times for me, that is just Peruvian food. That's what joy means most of the time. But find what joy means to you and make that your goal to just find it as often as possible. So thank you so much for the opportunity. That's it.
Thank
Go
you,
for it.
Rita. Thank you so much. You're amazing, and you bring up a really good point. Do you hear that, audience? 27% of Latinx voters have cast their ballot. I mean, there's 16,000 ballots at home. So if you have a ballot at home that you haven't turned in yet, please go ahead and make that movida. And on that note, Rita, do you want to share some information on how to register to vote?
Yes, so online registration has closed on October 19th, but in California, you can register all the way till November 3rd. So if you're like, this is just a lot of information, don't worry, just take a form of ID and go to the county clerk. You can go to the county clerk in Santa Barbara or in SLO County, and they will register you right there. They will give you a provisional ballot. You will be able to vote. There are different websites that have different information. I can put our website in the chat if anyone wants information on candidates. You can do your own research and then just vote there. So just go to the county clerk and say, hey, I'm here. I know nothing, but I want to vote, and they will take care of you. And if you have questions, or if you know people that speak Spanish and they're not finding the resources because our systems are not built for people that only speak Spanish, you can send them my way. I'll also put my email in the chat. My email is rita@slocdp.org. SLOCDP.org stands for San Luis Obispo County Democratic Party. Thank you to everyone putting my email in the chat already. But yeah, you have until November 3rd, which is Tuesday. So just 1 week. So make it an effort right now. If you have a ballot with you, you can just fill it in, sign it, don't forget to sign it, and then take it to a drop-off location, which is pretty much any library in SLO County. Santa Barbara also has their own drop-off locations that are available. But if you just want to be safe, just go to the SLO county clerk with your ballot or with no ballot. If you haven't registered, you can still go and vote.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our panelists as well. If we could give them a round of applause by Zoom. You all give me so much joy. I am just blown away by the amount of wisdom, by the amount of knowledge, by the amount of just straight up perseverance of living in SLO, or like living in America in this current time. As a Latinx person, you know, I have so much that I can identify with from everybody who had shared their experiences, having lived in SLO, having worked in SLO for many years, have encountered racism in even like the smallest places, right? Like at Ross, for example, being followed around, or even being asked, like, you know, where does this go? Like, I don't work there. TJ Maxx being followed around by security guards, and when I'm with my family, and I don't even understand what's happening. And it's not only that, you know, I've been told that my application can't be accepted, even though there's a now hiring sign at the door. Recruitment staff at Cal Poly mispronounces my name, you know, in interviews, and even still today. I hate being called Mario. That is like one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like, that's not my name. You know, it's Mario. And you know, not only that, but I wrote some things down about, you know, just some themes that came up through the night. And you know, it started out as like segregation and these language gaps and these legacies of oppression, but then what came to be after that was that, you know, there's also resilience, there's resistance, there's rebellion, there are notes of being unafraid and being strong. And even though we live in a predominantly white or society, we unidos hacemos la fuerza. You know, we're here as a community, even if it's by Zoom, behind our screens. Estamos todos unidos. Aquí estamos todos esta noche. And I just want all of you to know that even if we're separated because of any sort of quarantine or any sort of conditions that don't allow you to socialize as what we're used to as a comunidad, con toda nuestra gente, you know, our family members, it's hard. It's so hard not being able to see our family in the ways that we're used to. But I want you all to know that we're all in it together. Even if we're not able to, you know, go all out like we're used to, just be patient. You know, we will get there, and we will rise as a community, as a people. We'll honor our family, the ones that we've lost along the way, the ones who have been holding our hands in an era of unprecedented times where things are just so uncertain. We'll know that we got through it together. And that's what I want to emphasize here, is that while we explained our individual narratives, we also contributed to a collective of knowledge, a collective of memory making, where we're all going to remember exactly who came, exactly who was called out, and who called out what. And to look back on an event such as this one, where we were given each other the space to be brave, to be safe, and to share our lives and our stories with each other and our public community. I know we went over our time, and I just want to say thank you to everybody for making the time, for being here tonight. Honor our ancestors. My late aunt, who was lost earlier this year, and my dad, who is looking down at us from above. And all of the other family that I've lost over the years. You know, it's such an important thing to honor and remember those that without them, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have had the confidence to achieve my dreams, to go forth, to graduate from Cuesta, to graduate from Cal Poly, to go to grad school and get my PhD. This is a community effort, and I want you all to know it started at Cuesta College. Thank you for having me.